Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about unpacking your money history and money mindset, overcoming mismatched money styles, and creating and setting financial goals as a couple. But before we jump into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
We beat the COVID boss on the weekend.
Oh, we did. The big boss at the end of the COVID game.
Yeah. Well, our big boss. Not everybody's big boss, but this has been a biggie. So way back in 2019, for my 30th birthday, I was gifted a voucher to stay at the Taronga Zoo and do the Roar and Snore experience, where you get to stay overnight at the zoo, sleep in a tent, overlooking the beautiful Sydney Harbour, and have a behind-the-scenes experience with the zoo and see some of the animals. And this thing had been rescheduled 5 times.
Yeah.
And on the weekend, it came to fruition, and we got to go on our overnight date at the zoo.
How good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a, the experience itself was amazing.
Yeah, it was.
But it was also just a relief. It was like, yay. So that was an incredible experience. We got to feed the giraffes and spend some time behind the scenes of the zoo and see some of the things that are not open to the everyday public, which was really amazing. But it was also really nice to do something that we've never done before.
Yeah.
Quite a unique experience that really did fuel my tank up. Across the various businesses and my job and the podcast and our life, I live in a 90-day world. I break my year into 90-day sprints, and not all of those align perfectly, but it's around about the same. So I'm coming towards the end of a 90-day window.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has fueled me up is that some of the projects that I set for this 90 days, I'm already done, which is unlike me.
Often crammed towards the end of the 90-day cycle. And
yes, I do, which is why I set myself these 90-day cycles, because the deadline works for me.
Yeah.
So I feel fueled up by the fact that I'm ahead of schedule for myself, which is, considering everything that we've had going on in our world in the last 90 days, I'm pretty proud of. So that's a bit of a career and business and self, because I think that might mean I'm growing. It might mean maybe I'm evolving in my time and project management as well. But what about you, Nath? What fueled you up this last week?
Oh, well, I'm definitely behind with some of my 90-day sprint goals.
Oh, your deadline is looming.
I know. I've got some work to do. Just as well, we're spending a couple of nights apart this week, so I can try and cram in some of those goals that I set for this quarter. So my major fuel up was the same as you, Sammy. It was going to Taronga and having a bit of a date night with you and experiencing the whole thing that was Roar and Snore. But one of the other things that fueled me up, it might be a little bit of a strange one, but it was actually doing our taxes the other day. So this has been on our to-do list for probably
way too long. Don't tell everyone.
Anyway, way too long. Let's just say that. And so we've just been kicking this can down the road and down the road and down the road. And finally, we prioritized it, made some time to actually look back at the previous year and finalize our tax. So I'm sure our accountant will be happy with us too. And I think it's just one of those things where fueling your tanks doesn't necessarily have to be all fun and happy and joyous and everything like that. It can actually be kicking over some of those goals or some of those chores or some of those things that have been sticking around for a while, and is a little win, even though it may not be an overly enjoyable task.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes the things that fuel our tank up are not necessarily super fun.
No.
Yeah, and in this episode, actually, we talk a little bit about money and our relationship with money and these kind of adulting kind of tasks. But we also talk about this idea of the 8 different fuel tanks. So before we launch into the episode, I just wanted to recap them with you if you're a new listener, or maybe if you're an old listener, just to refresh. Like, the idea of living a fueled up life is being very intentional about how much fuel you put into these 8 different tanks and checking in on those tanks regularly to see what needs fuel. So the first one is self, and that's all about your relationship with yourself.
So the next one is your romantic relationship.
The third one is your relationships and network, your relationships with all your peers, colleagues, friends, family, your wider circle.
And the next one is humming household. So that's really about all of your day-to-day running and making sure everything is running smoothly.
Then there's your career and business and keeping that topped up, because opportunities aren't just waiting for you, they're created by you.
So the next one is wealth and lifestyle. So it's not just about money and long-term wealth, it's about the lifestyle that you're choosing to live as well.
The 7th one is the world. So that's about your contribution to the world, not just in a financial way, but what are the gifts that you're sharing with the world to help make this place a better place?
And the final one is the future. So that's the big long-term goals that we set to really get to the place where you want to be.
Yeah, and these 8 fuel tanks are yours. They're yours to take care of. They're yours to add fuel to and to monitor and make sure that they are sitting where you want them to. It's not about it being all full all of the time, but having the awareness of what areas of your life might need a little bit of extra fuel and what is already full to the top.
So on that note, here's this week's guest.
Today we've got Jen Fontanilla joining us. Jen is a certified money coach, speaker, and best-selling author of 6 books. She's worked with organizations such as the Walt Disney Company, Warner Brothers, Sony Studios, Target, Costco, Goodwill, and the US Air Force. With almost 17 years of experience in the financial services industry, she uses her easygoing style to help others go from financial overwhelm and confusion to clarity and peace of mind by helping them develop a healthy relationship with their money in order to better manage it. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Thank you. So excited to be here with you both.
So, it's great to have you.
So you've had a really big career talking all things money, but I want to go back before that. How did you get interested in money?
Yes, I remember decades ago, I started my career first in graphic design. And I was doing the packaging and displays for the entertainment industry, for the gaming industry, for big warehouse clubs like Costco and Sam's Club and things like that. And so anytime you go into the store and you see those things made out of cardboard, that was the stuff that I worked on. And it was lucrative. And I was making a great living in my mid-20s. And I sat there one day thinking, I went to college. I was very educated, but not once did I have a financial management class, financial literacy class. And I started wondering, who else feels this way? You start adulting, you start making really great money, and then you don't know what the heck you're doing with it. I mean, The most I got was, okay, I opened a checking account. I was good about saving, but only in a savings account. But I knew there had to be much more than that. When you start to hear terms like stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all these other things, you start to wonder, well, how come I don't know anything about that? And at the time, it wasn't the word or the acronym FOMO wasn't around, but I do have that fear of missing out. And so when it comes to not knowing certain information where I know it has a direct effect on my future or what I could be doing, I'm the kind of person that has to look into it. And so I started feeling all these things and I said, you know what, I need to know. And if I'm feeling this way, how many other people out there are feeling lost when it comes to understanding how to manage our money?
Oh, I definitely don't think you're alone. I think there's lots of people out there that are feeling exactly the same thing. And I know that we definitely went through a very similar kind of time as well, where we had got our kind of first major kind of career jobs and then had started bringing in some paychecks and going, well, what do we actually do with this now?
So in your bio, we talked a little bit about like the mindset around it. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by like money mindset.
Yes. So when we talk about money mindset, it's the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the experiences, the money stories. And basically those are the things that we grew up with. And what did we learn from our mother? What did we learn from our father? And we don't really stop to think about what are the subconscious patterns that we are learning on a daily basis that affect the way we make our financial decisions today, especially as adults. And so the mindset is really about our relationship with money. What are we learning about money? How do we look at it? And what are the words that we think about? Is it negative? Is it like, oh, I hate paying bills. Oh, I can't stand taxes. Or is it, oh, you know what? There is an abundance of things. I can make money easily. And so our mindset really is involved with the thoughts and feelings and the patterns that we have in relation to money.
Yeah, and I think that quite often there's these sayings like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees and all of those sorts of things like thrown around. And I don't think that people really understand kind of the impact that does have on our mindset around money.
Exactly.
What was your relationship like with money at that time, Jen? You obviously went, oh, I'm a bit curious about the technical aspects of what to do with money and where to put it and how to grow it. But how was your attitude and your mindset towards money at that point?
This is a great question because for a big majority of my career in the financial services industry, it was the technical stuff. It was the investments. I had the licenses and whatnot. So I used to do retirement accounts, college planning, all those different things, insurance. And not once did I ever stop to think how much of a part money mindset played in all of this. And it wasn't in the more recent years where I started seeing like, oh my gosh, how could we not talk about this? How can we continue to ignore this when this plays such a critical part compared to all the technical and the logistics and the spreadsheets and the budgets? And I'm not saying that's not important and we don't need it, but it's not really setting us up for success when we are not addressing the subconscious patterns, when we're not looking at the foundational things that we need to pay attention to. Because those things are really what cause the challenges and the roadblocks that prevent us from implementing the strategies, from us properly using the financial tools. Because how often do you hear people say, yeah, I just can't stick to this budget. I just can't save. I've tried all these things and nothing seems to work. Because you're just trying to put a Band-Aid by switching the program, by switching the product, by switching the strategy. But it really is addressing the mindset. It's really addressing the relationship with money. It's really taking a deep dive and looking at what did I grow up with? And, you know, Nate, you said, well, money doesn't grow on trees or these different things that we've heard. Well, where did that come from? Do you believe it? Is that your absolute truth? And if you are, and it's a negative thought, how do you take that and look at how is it affecting the way you're handling your money today?
Yeah, I learned this thing from Tony Robbins around the idea that we will do whatever is required to create ourselves in line with the version that we believe we are. So it sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but like if you have a belief that I'm a spender or I'm a saver, you will do whatever is required to keep yourself in line with the way that you perceive yourself. So if you can change that language of like, well, I don't want to be a spender anymore. I would like to be a saver. Then you have to do that transition before you can actually become a saver. You need to believe that that's something, a version of you like that exists and is possible to create.
Exactly. And on top of that, it's also a matter of understanding, well, where did that thought come from? Did you learn it from somewhere in school? Did you learn it from church? Did you learn it from a parent, a teacher, whoever? Where did that come from? What was the incident that caused that statement to be said? When did you internalize that? And a lot of times we don't think about these things. It's like so fascinating to me. So I find it so incredibly interesting to see how these things that have happened to us as children growing up. And my goodness, here we are 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, stopping and pausing for once and going, oh my gosh, this is where it came from, you know? And it's crazy when you get that revelation.
Yeah. And even things like, do you believe that money is good or bad? Should it be spent or saved? Like, what do you consider to be a luxury purchase? Like, what are the things that you allow yourself to even indulge in? Or like, do you believe that money's easy to get or not so easy? Like, there's something silly that Nathan and I don't know if it's something silly. Something that Nathan and I have done in recent years is I read a book, Jen Sincaro, I think her name is, and she has this great idea that like, what if you believe that money was everywhere and it was really easy to obtain and it was just everywhere and you just had to reach out and grab it? So if you ever come to our apartment, there's jars all over the house, in bookcases, on shelves, in our pantry, stuck to the fridge, with $50 notes inside. And it's just this subconscious little reminder every day that money really is everywhere. And if we want to go and get it, we can go and get it. So, but it's definitely something that Nathan and I have been working on, particularly the last couple of years around that. Like, what do we want our money and our financial situation to be? But what's the story that we need to have first, or the beliefs that we need to have first? And one of those being that we are abundant. We have more than we could ever need, and we have enough to give, and we have enough to share, and we have enough for each other. And there's totally a runway for us to have more, and that's available.
I love that. It isn't silly at all. I love it because you guys are so intentional about it. You took that statement and you manifested it. You made it happen, which I want to point out is very different from somebody who's disorganized with their money, right? Because think about it. If somebody's disorganized and they have change here, they kind of scatter some paper bills somewhere else, and they can technically say like, well, yeah, I got money all around. But that wasn't the intent, right? You guys are going into it with the intent that we are purposely putting it out there because money is easy. It's at our access. We have it. You did it with intent versus somebody that's just disorganized that can say like, oh yeah, I got money laying around here. And there's like, no, you're just sloppy about it. There's a big difference. So I just want to make that clear that Nate and Sammy did this intentionally. It wasn't about them being disorganized, because there is a difference, and that is also something that affects the flow and energy of money coming to us and other opportunities when we're not organized and when we are not creating space for that money and energy to flow into our lives.
Yeah. And I think there is like that energy around, nobody likes to be approached by the guy or the girl in the bar who seems really desperate, right? You want to be approached by somebody who's like cool, calm, collected, sure of themselves. And I think we carry that kind of energy into our relationship with money too. Like if you're desperate to find it, hold on to it, grab it, like that energy just sort of vibrates out like a little cartoon, like the smelly lines. So, Jen, you've joined us on a show called Date Forever, and we talk all about our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with our partner so that we can date ourselves and our chosen person forever. What's your relationship status?
I am in a committed relationship.
Yeah? How long have you been together?
About almost a year and a half.
Oh, wow. So we know that this has been like a little bit of a journey to get there, right?
Oh, my goodness. Absolutely. Yes.
So tell us how have you arrived here in this relationship?
Yes. So previous to this, I was married, and that lasted for 6 years. The total time in that relationship was 10 years. I didn't have any kids. And out of that was a divorce. And out of that was a tumultuous journey of undoing horrific financial ruin. And it's one of those things I'm very adamant about now, where I look at couples and trying to find out like, okay, how are you in sync? Are there these things that you've talked about? And which also led me a few years ago to write a book called Do Before I Do. And it's the financial questions that you need to have conversations about before you take that big leap, before you move in together, before you decide to get married. Because, even in my own situation, finances was a huge issue. And talk about feeling imposter syndrome. I mean, I was a financial advisor at that time. And here I am going through this. It's like I can help everybody else, but I couldn't help myself in my own situation. And so going through that taught me a lot of lessons, taught me a lot about becoming independent and understanding what are those things that you need to look out for the next time you're going to get into a relationship. And so I got involved in another relationship shortly after that, and that ended. I actually have a son. We did not get married, but even in that relationship, the values were so different. We didn't look at money the same. It was just crazy. And I'm telling you, the feeling of knowing all that being in the financial industry, and yet seeing like, my gosh, I can't even figure this stuff out for myself was just so strange. So strange. And knowing that everybody else I was helping was happy and good. I mean, my gosh, I think that's what helped me stay afloat mentally and emotionally, knowing like, okay, I can help other people. It's just, I got to get my own crap together. So for many years, I was just so down on myself, thinking like, I don't know why I keep going through this stuff. Right. And so it was in the more recent years where I started becoming more interested in this relationship with money. So remember, I told you in the beginning, it was all logistics, all strategy. And so for even my own self, understanding the importance of the money mindset and the relationship I had with money. And finally, when I did the inner work for myself, I started putting things together like, oh my goodness, this is why it's happening to me. But it was so much easier for me to identify it in other people and what they were going through. And I love this quote by Les Brown, the motivational speaker. He says, you can't see the picture when you're inside the frame. Well, no wonder I can help everybody else because I'm not in their picture. I'm outside of their frame. I'm looking at it from a third person's perspective, an outsider perspective. So here I am trying to think like, well, I don't know why I can't help myself. Well, it's because I'm in the freaking thing. So yeah. So when I went through that, I started realizing all these simple things that I needed to do, whether that started cleaning up relationships that I needed to get rid of, my physical space, understanding where my own patterns came from. What did I learn from my mom and dad? What did I see as I was growing up about money? And here's the interesting part. I didn't grow up where it was, oh, there was problems. We were struggling. I didn't have a negative point of view of it, but I was having a hard time trying to find out, well, what did I learn if it wasn't a struggle? And I saw where I got my frugality. I saw that I had a hard time spending. I saw that I had a hard time asking for things. Like it's very hard for me to ask for gifts. Like if it's my birthday or Christmas, people will say, well, what do you want? I'm like, nothing. It's okay. Because my money story has an incident where it involved me feeling not worthy of asking. So as I was going through these things, I started clearing out these blocks and whatnot. And so at the time that I got connected to my partner, I started seeing like, oh, this is why something great and healthy hasn't come along is because all those things were happening and I still hadn't worked through them. And so it's interesting as we work on ourselves, we don't attract what we want, we attract who we are. And so it's so important for us to stop and pause and do this work and to understand what's going on in order for the things that we want to come into our lives. Because oftentimes we're asking ourselves, like, why isn't it happening? How come I can't just get this right? Why is this continuing on and on? And so until I stopped to understand my own money story, I saw how it was affecting the decisions I was making. So things that I tell other people is like, trust me, I have gone through it all. And I think one of the things I appreciate most about what people say about working with me is that they can see I'm not judgmental. They can see that I'm so compassionate and understanding. Is my goodness, if you went through what I went through, like, trust me, like, your situation, you're going to be fine.
Yeah. Jen, I really there's so many good things in there that you just shared, but I want to say like those internal patterns and loops of behavior and things like where we make the same mistake or a version of the same mistake over and over and over again. And like, you really aren't ready to deal with it until you're sick of your own shit. And I love that quote, like the master arrives when the student is ready. And yeah, like we said, the Date Forever podcast, all about getting to know yourself and dating yourself on a really intimate way. And some of that is about, understanding the beliefs that you have, understanding the stories that you have, why you have them. Could they perhaps be designed in a better way? So I'd love to know, like, in terms of dating yourself and unpacking some of those things, was there a process that you went through, or how did you go about doing like what we call the inner work?
Yes, the exercise that is very simple is stopping and pausing and asking yourself, what is the earliest event that you can recall that had to do with money? It could be, I remember when I was 3 years old, my mom gave me 50 cents and told me I could buy anything in the store. So I bought a piece of gum and I decided to save the other 5 cents. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be, I remember asking my dad if we can get McDonald's, and then he turned back at me and screamed, like, do you have money for that? And so there's going to be these different events that happen at the earliest age that you can recall. And then I have people, even I did this myself, we write down everything that we can remember all up until the present age. And then it could take hours because you're trying to think of what has happened all this time.
Hey, you're going to have a relationship with money for forever. So in a couple of hours, probably good investment.
Exactly. And so when you do that and you look at what you've written, you'll start to see some kind of pattern. And you'll start to see everything that has happened. What are the emotions and feelings? Is this where your guilt's coming from? Is this why you have a hard time asking for help? Has somebody yelled at you? Has somebody told you, and again, it could be your mother or father, whoever raised you, a pastor, a priest, someone in the church, could be a teacher, a guardian, whoever. And you start and looking like at these things that you've written and you realize like, oh my gosh, this is where it came from? Like, oh my God, it's so eye-opening. Because again, you're stopping and pausing to really take a look at what is your money story? Where did this come from? Where did these things that I've been hearing all this time, or why do I have such a disdain towards rich people? Or why do I put down poor people? Do I think they're lazy? You know, all these thoughts, where are they coming from? So that's part of the inner work where you're stopping and pausing and taking some kind of inventory and trying to figure out like, where did this come from and what is this experience and how did this relationship and what I think about money start from?
So Jen, is this something that we should do as individuals or as a couple or both?
I would say both. Yeah. As individuals, yes, because obviously there's going to be an age and point in time where you weren't together yet. Right. And I think this is so important, but I think both would be great. If you do this as an individual, it really helps us understand, oh, this is why we keep clashing on who should do the budget. Or give you an example, in my book, I wrote about how one partner could be, let's say it was the husband, he was used to seeing his mom doing the budgeting. And then she could be in the opposite end where the mom didn't do it. The dad took care of everything that was financial. He went to work. The mom took care of the household, taking care of the kids, didn't really have to do much about the money. So she was kind of in the dark. So you see as they come together, there is a different expectation. Well, and he could be saying, well, I saw my mom take care of everything. How come you're not doing it? She's coming into the relationship. Well, I never saw my mom do anything. She just took care of other stuff. And you see how that can cause conflict because they had grown up with different upbringing, different views of how money was handled in the household. And now they're coming together and they have opposite expectations of who should be handling what. So it's very important as an individual to do it. But then obviously when you come together, this helps you have a greater understanding and respect and appreciation for, oh, I understand this is what you went through. It's easy for us to ask questions about past relationships. Like, well, how did your ex treat you? Well, have you been cheated on? Well, how did you handle, birthdays and anniversaries? But it's very rare that we ask our partner, like, well, how did you see money in your house when you were growing up? Like, that's a weird question, right? We don't think about it. But when you think about it now, what an impact.
Not such a weird question.
Yeah, not such a weird question. It's almost like, why aren't we asking these questions? And if we were able to have those conversations up front and earlier, how many fights could we have avoided? How much better, greater understanding and respect for our partner to understand this is why we keep running into conflict. This is why, because I'm expecting you to do one thing and that's not how you grew up and vice versa. So I would say as individuals, very, very important. It helps you understand yourself better, but also as a couple so that you can come together and say, okay, this is where it's not converging well. And this is the part we need to work through and understand. I see where you're coming from. I see you. I understand it. Now, how do we move forward?
So I guess once we've unpacked our past and our money histories, so how do we then actually try and get that alignment between both people in the couple? And do we need full alignment or is there kind of a middle ground that we can come to?
I think it's what you decide that you want. I think middle ground is probably, if we can get there, great. And then I think as a couple, you know how it goes. Things change, life happens, and it's all about how do we maneuver through these things together. And every situation that I've realized is different. There's going to be different circumstances that are happening to either one of us or both of us that can change the course of things, right? Because let's say there's a death in the family. Let's say there's a new baby. There could be all kinds of different life things that happen. So we might have the best intentions to go on a certain path, but something could happen and throw us off. And so it's kind of like if you have that guide of knowing like what were your goals together? What did you discuss in that you wanted to achieve short term, midterm, long term? How did you talk about how you're going to tackle that together? What did you place priority on the things that you want to achieve? And then if something does happen and it takes you guys off course, then you have these meetings, which I call like money dates. And they could be as simple as 15 minutes once a week, once a month. I think in the beginning, especially the more frequent, the better. But it's just kind of coming together. I mean, you think about it in our jobs or people that when we think about our businesses and our jobs, we have weekly meetings with our team. But we don't get together with our partner to talk about money often. It's like, that just seems so crazy.
No, there's clearly a reason why it works in business. So why not translate some of that across to your relationship?
I do love that you've shared that, Jen, because we're going to do a little plug here. If you would like to implement that kind of weekly chat or regular chat, we have a happy hour agenda that's available on our website, fuelcollective.com.au/freebies. And it's a 60-minute chat to have Nathan and I do it once a week, recommend once a week. But one of the points on that agenda is money. It's just a quick check-in, log into the app, take a look, where are things at? But also, if you're going to check in on where things are at, you need to know where you're going. You're like, no point looking at the map and being like, oh, that's where we are. You're like, okay, but I don't know where we've come from and I don't know where we're going. So it's kind of useless information. But yeah, if someone wants to jump in and implement those kind of conversations, we can help you out a little bit. But Jen, I want to go back to something that you said, like you were doing the reflection work and you realized, oh, I couldn't see it because I was inside the picture, and now you're outside of the frame and you can reflect back. Like if you could go and talk to Jen in your time machine, what would be like the 3 conversations that you really wish you'd had with that relationship or any relationship?
I think the first one would be for myself, asking myself, am I doing all that I can to learn about money mindset and just self-improvement, self-development in general? I think as a younger version of myself, I got very caught up in the logistics, getting ahead, climbing the corporate ladder or whatever it was at that time, and forgetting that the mindset was so critical. And doing that work, all the things that I do now, if I could have done it 20-something, 30-something years ago, I think that was probably the biggest thing. The second thing I would say is learn to forgive. For so many years, when I look back at what I had gone through, I hung on to so much guilt and shame and unforgiveness. Being mad at other people for, you did this to me. Being angry at myself and saying, I'm so freaking stupid. I can't believe I allowed that to happen. And so now knowing what I know now and wishing I could have that conversation, that would be so important for me to just say, you did the best that you could at that time with what you knew. It's time to let it go. It's time to forgive. And so often we want to hang on to that anger. We want to hang on to that guilt because somebody else wronged us. Somebody else caused us to lose so much. But yet I'm always telling people, including myself, that the forgiveness is not necessarily for the other person all the time. It's really for you. It's a gift that you need to give yourself. And when we can do that, the faster we can move on, the faster that we can move forward at a higher vibrational frequency. Because all that stuff, that guilt, that shame, that anger is all low on the vibrational frequency chart. And that's not where we want to operate. If we want to thrive, if we want to have an intentional life, if there are things that we want to achieve. And so I would remind myself that unless I don't forgive myself, I'm going to constantly struggle. I'm going to constantly be in this pattern and this holding cell of not moving forward. How can I move on if I keep making these affirmations and I keep setting these goals? Like, well, no wonder I'm not moving forward because I'm holding on to all this other crap instead of letting it go. So it's about learning all those things. And then the third one, I think, is just continuously working on yourself and loving yourself and setting boundaries. I think too often what I had done in the past, and sometimes even now, is like I give so much of myself that I lose myself in the situation or in that person where it's to the detriment, right, of yourself, where you're not realizing, wait a minute, like, are you setting boundaries? Because everything that you say yes to, you have to realize you are saying no to something else, right? And so for me, being too trusting, being too giving, there has to be a boundary, because you get to some point when you're overdoing it that it's to your detriment, and then it causes you to go backwards, where now you're sacrificing too much, where you're not moving ahead. You're thinking and putting everything into somebody else or into another situation, and it's hard because when you're such a giving and loving person and you want to help, it's not bad in itself, but when it's causing you to go backwards or not move forward because you're neglecting what you need, then it's preventing you from moving forward. Then it's preventing you from making that progress, because it gets to a point where you're moving away from self-love, and we can mistaken it for, well, I'm sacrificing, I'm giving, right? But no, there's a point, and that's the part, there's a balance where you have to realize you need to put that boundary in order for you to still love yourself and respect yourself. And so it's really about having all these different 3 points be these conversations about how do you ultimately take care of yourself? Because the better that we can do that for ourselves, the better that we can show up for our partner as well.
Yeah, I love that you've shared that. So the business that sits alongside the Date Forever podcast is Fuel Collective. And this is this idea of like, what if we lived a really fueled up and intentional life and relationship? And what does that mean to add fuel to the various tanks of your life? And the first one is self, and it's your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have. And I have quite a few friends who have those really strong people-pleasing, helping tendencies. And for them, as they've unpacked those kinds of things, you recognize that, well, as a child, that's how they got love and praise, and they inherently believe that their value only exists when they're doing something for someone else or creating value for someone else. And it's a really tricky thing to get into. But as you start to establish those boundaries and go, oh, okay, well, actually, me and what I want and what I need, that's actually important. And then how that can sort of start to change. Because if that relationship with your self tank hits empty, you can't help anyone anyway. No. So reframing that, yeah, the boundaries are important, not just for your relationship with that other person or that other thing, but with yourself too. So there's 2 other tanks that I wanted to talk to you about. One is wealth and lifestyle, and the other is the future. And I find that these are kind of like 2 sides of the same coin, because with money mindset and even just financial well-being, there's the here and the now and how we're creating wealth or generating revenue or income or whatever it is for your household. But then also the lifestyle that either affords or doesn't afford you, both on ups and downs of working all the time and earning a lot of money, but then having no lifestyle because you're busy earning all of that, or vice versa. You've got all the lifestyle, taking all the time off, relax, chill, but not building any of the wealth. But then also having those things that connect with what you want for the future. So I would love to know if you've got any insights on how we can kind of balance those 2 tanks, and how do we take care of the wealth and lifestyle creation now, but also keep in mind the future.
This is such a great, interesting topic, because you're right. I love that you phrased it as 2 sides of a coin, because that is an issue, right? You have some financial gurus out there that make it sound like in order for you to build wealth, you have to live in poverty style. Oh. No
coffee, no avocado toast, live in the cheapest house you can find, thrift your clothes.
I mean, I get it. But no, I don't coach anybody to live in beans and rice or, whatever it is. It's just ridiculous. I think there are so many different things that we can do. I think it's important that we create a way for us to live intentionally. I think there's a way that we can have some of that balance, and also sprinkling reality into it. Like, I get it. I'm also not saying go on a shopping spree, oh, she said live like you want to live.
Treat yourself.
Yeah, hold on. We're not saying
everyone smokes salmon every day. Yeah.
we're not saying that here. But I think to completely deprive yourself, I think that is so ridiculous, because if you're going to live that way, I mean, what are you saying to God in the universe? Like, I am accepting this, that I need to live in poverty in order to sustain like my lifestyle. I feel like it's signaling out that I don't deserve anything nice right now. Well, then you're going to stay there, I think. So I think there are ways to reward yourself. I think there are ways where you can still enjoy some things within reason. And I think this is where the logistics come in. This is where you do have to do some intentional planning and looking at what are the resources we have? What money do we have? Are we planning for the goals? And what are we doing for each of those goals, whether it's short-term, long-term? What is it that we want to achieve together? When you plan that together, you have the lay of the land. A lot of couples don't come together and talk about these things. We kind of just pay our bills, live life, wonder why we don't have enough. And then we just kind of rinse and repeat. And we wonder like, well, why aren't we getting ahead? This is like you said, Sammy, like we're not we're not planning anything, we're getting nowhere because that's what we're doing. And so you aim for nothing, you're going to get nothing and keep wondering why it's not happening. And so there are ways where if you create it where you recognize the things that you want to reward yourself with. And even if you start little, okay, maybe you do a staycation. Maybe you don't fly to Hawaii for a week. Maybe you can't do certain things, but that doesn't mean it has to be forever. There are some things that you can still reward yourselves. And also, what are we doing to plan for the saving? What are we doing to reach some of these financial goals that we have created as priority? But if we're not thinking about what those goals are, if we're not prioritizing what needs to be done first, if we're not figuring out what needs to be set aside, everything is being done haphazardly. And then it doesn't feel like there's any progress. So when somebody creates a spending plan, instead of saying the B word budget, when we create a spending plan, how about you allocate some money in there for the next time we go out, the next time we want to do something fun? And I think it's important too for couples to each partner have their own spending money. That way, each person feels that they have some kind of independence, that it's not always the situation like, well, can I go buy this? Like figure out what is the amount that you need to have in your own accounts for your spending money. And then you have another account. So this is kind of answering that question. Like people asking all the time, should we have separate or joint? I'm like, I think you should have it all.
We've got it all.
Yeah, we've got it all. Yeah.
We've got it all and some.
If you have separate accounts for spending, and then you have one for the joint or the things that need to be the responsibilities, whether it's rent, mortgage, utilities, the money that gets put into there is spent only for that. So it's very important to separate things. And I think having those separate spending accounts and coming to an agreement what goes in what, and it just allows somebody to feel that independence. It doesn't make somebody feel like, oh, I have to ask for everything. And I get it. There's going to be some big ticket items. And of course, if you're going to go buy a car, it'd be nice to ask your partner and discuss that. But my gosh, if it's like, I've read stories where this one wife, she felt so yucky that she had to ask her husband if she could get like a $60 massage.
Yeah. Or new undies or stuff
like that deprives somebody of their independence in making these financial decisions. And you just, when it's separated like that, the other person cannot blame the other person. Like, well, why did you go buy that? And you can just,
like, that's my money.
No, you have your portion that you can spend how you like. And I have my portion. And it just creates more harmony. That's what we're looking for. Peace. How do we create peacefulness in the household, but we're still achieving our financial goals? And so it's like little things like that are very, very simple that can just be implemented so that there is no animosity. There's none of this like making this other person feel like full of shame that they did this. It's about you doing something as an independent individual, but also discovering what is it that we need to do together.
Yeah.
I think one of the other beauties of that system as well is that when you're buying gifts for the other person, you feel like you're actually spending your money for that, and you're not just like buying them a token gift out of our money that you've essentially paid for your own gift anyway. So I know that's definitely
gifts are my love language, Jen. Yeah. So he's all over it. He's like, yeah, I gotta work out a way to got a system to.
That's it.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And that just all leads down to independence. I want to feel like I was able to do this for my partner. Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure everybody knows couples who are living all in one tank, all about the wealth, all about the lifestyle right now. Get the car, get the holiday, get the furniture, whatever the things are. And that's all about living for right now. And then I'm sure you've probably got couples who are all about the future, and we can't have that and we can't do that. And we're going to cut out coupons and use that for our anniversary dinner and like all of those kinds of things. So I really do think there's a balance in taking care of those two different tanks in a way that feels, I think you used a good word, in harmony with one another. They don't have to be balanced and equal, but what feels harmonious so that you can take care of yourself right now, but also into the future.
Yeah. I just want to dive a little bit deeper into one of the things you said as well around goal setting. And like, is there a way or a process that you can kind of take people through to set some goals?
Yeah, you can, as individuals, take a piece of paper or get on your computer, whatever you like, and take 10 minutes, not looking at each other's answers, no cheating, and just ask yourself, okay, right, let's list down like the top 20 things that we want to achieve or that we want. And this is such a great way for you to just freely think. And hey, I want to remodel the kitchen. Hey, I want to go to Bali. Hey, I want to buy a motorcycle. Whatever it is, right? And when you make your individual list, then you can come together, and then you can pick your top 3 and ask yourself. And what's really cool about this is that you may discover, like, I didn't know you wanted to do that. We
both want a motorcycle.
Nate's using that one because that came up for us last year.
Yeah, you will find, and it's such a wonderful way to connect and build your relationship where you can discover, I didn't know you wanted to do that. I didn't know you've always wanted to go here. And, so it's not only just financial goals. It's not even just goals in general. It's a way for you to also build a deeper connection, relationship where you're discovering your partner at another level where you may not have known that they wanted these things or achieved these things. And so after you do that, you come together and you also pick the first or the top 3. You also have to be realistic. What's the budget? What kind of money do we have in order to do this? And you pick the top 3 that you want to achieve and work towards. And so maybe it's the trip that you've been putting off for so long. Maybe the next one is like, hey, you know what? How do we add a second room to the house? And maybe the third one could be, okay, you know what? If there's children, like maybe we send Michael to camp, whatever it is. And then you take that and you reverse engineer it. Okay, when do we want to do this? And how much is it going to cost? And how much do we have to put aside? And then you work towards that. Or maybe if you're someone that believes in credit cards, how many reward points can we get? How fast can we pay this off? Because I'm not a person that's against credit cards. I think if you use it wisely, it could be so advantageous. If you have the discipline, if you understand how they work, if you know how to use points and all these things. So we're not going to go into that. But I think that, again, like there's a lot of financial gurus out there that make it sound like credit cards are the devil. It's not. It's how you use it as a tool to your benefit. Yeah. So, those are some ways that we can tackle how do we get these things done? And it's such a motivating thing as a couple to see, hey, look we're almost there. And it also puts you guys in check. Especially there's one of us that is a spender and likes to buy things spontaneously and whatnot. It puts you in check because if you realize like, wait a minute, we're trying to get these things done, it can make you stop and pause like, okay, maybe I really don't need XYZ because our goal is to get this. And the more, again, if I say yes to this, I'm saying no to this goal. So those are just some ways that you can tackle. How do we create these goals together? So find out what each of you wants and then find out, and then you find out what you want to do together, but it also allows you to work towards something together. It gives you some meaning and purpose, and it just gives you some kind of backup between how are we going to manage this together so that we can ultimately achieve what we want. And then you can always go back to the list and do the exercise again, and maybe you go through the next top 3 after you achieve those, or maybe you start doing it concurrently, whatever. But also as an individual, again, we're talking about individual independence. How can you do some of those things for yourself? Because how many times have you seen couples where there's somebody that gets lost? There's somebody that loses their identity because they poured it all into their partner, all into their kids, and they lost their job,
their family,
everything,
caring for someone else.
And then they come to this point in their life and they realize like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. They lost their sense of identity. They lost their sense of purpose. And that's what's really sad. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. Why come to that point in your life when if you had just done this list, you could have said, we did this as a couple, but I was also able to achieve these things for myself.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about self-love. We're talking about taking care of ourselves. Again, if we neglect those things, how are you going to fully show up for everybody else when in the back of your mind, you're feeling, oh, I got to put everybody else first. I'm being self-sacrificing. I'm doing this for everybody else. And it sounds like you want to become a saint, and I'm not trying to put it down, but it's like, you never want to be that victim martyr.
Yeah.
You never want to be putting yourself in that space because as much as it may sound loving, it's so self-sacrificing in a negative way. And it's sad. Then this person can go in a different way. Like now there could be resentment. Well, I did all of this for you. We did everything that you wanted. But by the same token, it's like you didn't do anything on your list. So now it's my fault that you didn't do this stuff. And here we are and you never said anything. It could go in so many negative ways. And we don't want that. This is about everybody trying to do the priorities as a family, as a couple, but also making sure that the things that you want to achieve are also achieved because that's so important as an individual.
Yeah. And Jen, I want to go back to something that you said early in that piece about goal setting and writing your own list and then comparing and collaborating in the middle. Like, I'm sure everybody's probably heard of that SMART goals framework. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. But I think that very first one of specific is so missed. Like, people say like, oh, I just want more money, or I want a bigger promotion or a bigger house or a bigger whatever the thing is. I want a better car. Like, those are not measurable or specific things. So one of the things that Nathan and I came out last time we did this activity, which was back in September 2021, we did a big dump of financial goals and things that we would really like and all sorts of stuff, big things, little things. But one of the things that came out for our like lifetime was like, we want to live by the water. We want waterfront living. Very specific. I want to live front and center to the water. And we were reflecting on it and going, okay, cool, that's the lifetime goal. What can we do now to get closer to that? And it actually prompted us to move to the beach. So we haven't got quite waterfront yet, but we are now 5-6 minute walk. So we're getting closer. But I don't know that if we not set that big goal to work backwards and go, okay, we can't have that big thing yet, but what steps can we take to be living more of that life that we want to live? So I really encourage couples to go do that exercise. We've done it. It brought up a whole heap of really cool things. And it's exciting to be collaborating with your person on the life that you want to design and live very intentionally rather than it happening by default. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for using your example. It's a perfect thing to demonstrate that it can be done in increments. Where, okay, we know what the end lifetime thing is, but for now, let's go here. And I think this is so important that you brought this up, Sammy, because oftentimes we're trying to jump from 0 to 20. It's like, hey, let's get to 8. Let's get to 15.
Or even just 1. Like, what would be one step closer?
Yeah, it's such a perfect example. And I think going back to the goal setting, if there's a certain trip, maybe you can't do a really far international one for 2 weeks. Okay, well, what can you do that is within your country? Maybe it's just a weekend. You're still doing something. And then I have to bring this up, but maintaining that attitude of gratitude. Okay, yeah, we can't do that yet, but we're grateful that we were able to do this. We were able to do this with what we had right now. We're on step 3. We're kidding. We're trying to get to 20, but we're at 3 and we are thankful and grateful for this.
Yeah. It's like that analogy that we used earlier around like the map of like knowing where you are, but also knowing where you're going and how far you've already come, and like really delighting in that, the progress and the journey and going there. It's not just the destination that's going to make you happy. Like really, take delight and joy in the process. Jen, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your story and your journey, and then also like some things that people can actually go and do and implement. And all of those exercises and activities that Jen shared, like, they're free. Like, sit down together. You don't need some fancy financial planner. You don't need to make any appointments. You don't need to go anywhere. Like, sit down together and work through that stuff. And you might be surprised what comes up. So go and implement as much as we can learn. The magic comes from the doing. So go do some doing. But Jenna, to say thank you for joining us today, we've provided a school uniform to a child in Cambodia. So to say thank you, like, this is really special because schooling is free in Cambodia, but the parents and family need to purchase the uniform, and sometimes that's out of reach, or the family has other needs, like really basic ones like shelter or food, and that kind of trumps buying a school uniform. So thank you so much for making that possible, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your expertise with us.
Thank you so much. This has been so fun to do with you both.
Yeah, no worries. So Jen, if people want to connect with you or kind of take that next step in their money journey with you, how should they do that?
Yes, you can easily find me on social media on Instagram or Facebook, and the handle is @JenMoneyCoach, JEN Money Coach. You also can get a free workbook download, and I will provide the link. And that's to set money goals in a smart way and taking a different approach where you're taking a look at your emotions and other simple tools that you can do that are easy and simple and very, very actionable. So make sure to download that, and we will provide the link for you. But definitely, if you need to reach me, you can also go to jenmoneycoach.com.
Yeah, awesome. No worries. We'll pop that link in the show notes.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.